Prologue, Year 874 PXF, Post-Zalia founding, Late Spring. The last traitor of Arnador Keep sat in the Hall of Judgment, awaiting his rendering. The weeks prior had seen 24 executions of the seditionists who conspired against the Emperor, and as intended, the populace of Jadenpool had now wearied of the spectacle. Even the unique circumstance of this last conspirator failed to reignite the interest of the noble factions of the capital. Veronique Coeur-Vermain entered the circular chamber deep within the black marble walls of the Hall of Judgment, as her station dictated was her right. The raised gallery where she sat overlooked the accused. He was in chains, seated in a severe, low-backed stone chair, perched on the small dais at the center of the room. Surrounding the accused were the 7 speakers. Each sat at a point of the Star of Fate, dressed in white robes with tight-fitting elbow-length gloves. Brushed platinum masks devoid of expression covered their faces, each enameled with the mark of their station. War's red sword, Prosperity's silver coin, Diplomacy's crossed olive leaf and dagger, Divine's golden ring of light, Arcana's blue flames, Labor's black silhouetted worker, and Peace's white dove. The speakers all wore a blood-red mantle, symbolizing the seriousness of the crime they judged and the verdict they would render. The accused, positioned in the star's center, was faced so only 2 of the 7 figures deciding their fate flanked their eyeline. In this judgment, their gaze fell between war and diplomacy. Osmond sat slouched with head lolling slightly to one side, blank eyes facing forward, a limp corpse with no more life than a doll made of flesh. Veronique's face, as still as ice in midwinter, gave no hint of her approval at seeing his catatonic state. She had visited his cell 2 nights earlier. The Emperor had placed Osmond in the deepest, most dilapidated portion of the dungeons below the hall, but that hadn't deterred Veronique from her visit. She had been in far worse places. Veronique knew that when she spoke to Osmond, her words would need to be more than just a slap in the face to reach him. They would need to jar him with the force of a knee to the groin. She had discovered over her life, most assumed her delicacy as a noblewoman was unimpeachable. But they had not endured the life she had lived. The guard opened the door to Osmond's cell for Veronique, as though he was opening the door of the imperial palace. She had purchased his compliance and discretion with a laughably small number of enchanted platinum coins that would magically hold the guard's tongue if it began to wag about her visit. The esteemed lady of House Coeur-Vermain strode into the cell without pause. Excrement and filth covered every surface, and there in the corner, huddled in abject misery, was Osmond.
"Do not speak. They monitor your every word,"
Veronique warned as she stepped into the center of the cell.
"Mine, however, are undetectable."
Her hand smoothed the angled hem of her midnight green fitted duster coat, and she paid no mind to her long, narrow-cut gray walking skirt dragging in the muck.
"We've never spoken, but I would hope you know who I am, as you were bedding my whore of a niece under the roof of my estate."
Veronique's words were flatly stated as fact, reserving any accusation and judgment for Serena alone, which made them hit Osmond all the harder. Osmond's gaze lifted and met hers, the slightest ember of Uldani rage bringing clarity to his thoughts momentarily. His chapped lips opened in an attempt to form words, but Veronique held a finger of her black-gloved hand to her lips for silence.
"Good,"
she thought to herself. She had his attention.
"You have been used, cruelly, maliciously, and with exacting premeditation. Serena executed her seduction of you for one reason and one reason only. Because my husband ordered it. You were a pawn my husband needed to fulfill his aspirations and to enact his manipulation of my son. Veronique studied Osmond's reaction to see if her words were sinking in. Seeing his eyes narrow, she continued. Perhaps you were contemplating confessing your actions to the speakers, to fulfill some code of honor and die with the rest of Duke Isul's guard. Or perhaps give your life out of loyalty or love for Serena, to show your faithfulness to her cause. Veronique examined the dried blood surrounding his eyes and trails leaking from his ears. Or maybe even out of pure cowardice, realizing that your actions brought death and misery to so many innocent lives. A truth that has undoubtedly drifted to your ears, even down here. Osmond lowered his eyes from hers. The Lady Courvermain stepped forward and bent at the waist to bring her face to Osmond's, lifting his chin with her gloved hand. Tying one's honor and loyalty to those with neither is to play into their game. My husband will pay no price for what he has done. Serena held no love for you. Not when she left you weeping on your knees in my courtyard, nor when she reached out for you to be her courier through the winter. You were nothing more than a tool my husband commanded her to use. Osmond wanted to turn his head away, but Lady Courvermain's delicate fingers held his chin like iron. Veronique knew she could now make her proposal. If you owe anyone your loyalty and honor, it is your Kroltran. Osmond's eyes widened and locked onto hers. She raised a knowing eyebrow as she spoke. Oh yes, I know the meaning of those braids you put into Talon's hair the night of my gala. Veronique paused to hammer home her accusation. You abandoned your soul brother when he needed you most. Yet even after betraying your bond to him, my son still saved your life. Her gaze bored into Osmond like a knife. You may have run away from the Isles, but you can't escape the blood that flows in your veins and the bonds your people made to the elements when they split from the elves. You owe my son a Cat Malorn, and I expect you to pay your debt as a betrayer of his love for you, by choosing to live. Veronique stood back up. You need not lie. Just say nothing at all. Sink back into the madness the Emperor ensured would visit you by placing you here. I will take care of the rest. She straightened her gloves. Then, do whatever is necessary to redeem yourself in my son's eyes. Veronique left the cell without another word. To influence the outcome of a rendering would require leverage over all 49 potential speakers who could have ascended to each of the 7 stations of judgment. Coordinating 4 pieces on a bureaucratic chessboard muddied with intrigue and fraught with peril would be considered political suicide for any of the nobility. But not Veronique Courvermain. She had spent decades of her extended life honing her ability to move mountains by displacing pebbles, and as such, she had been gifted many favors through the years, one of which was about to come due. Veronique rose from the deep curtsy she had assumed to show proper deference to Emperor Brinton Aurorus while his staff remained in his private spell-warded chamber. Veronique, I cannot allow your husband's involvement in this treachery to go unanswered. The Emperor spoke with candor once they were alone. Lady Courvermain looked the Emperor directly in the eyes. Brinton, I am not here for my husband. His visage rankled from the use of his first name so casually, but curiosity held his tongue from any rebuke. He instead raised a manicured dark eyebrow at his guest. The Oldani Guard. He is not to be executed. Exile shall be his sentence. Veronique's request continued in a measured, weighted cadence. You know the facts of his involvement. He lifted no weapon against the Empire, and therefore no harm shall come to him. She crossed to the crowned ruler of the Zalian Empire's desk, where he sat blinking in disbelief. The Emperor's face flushed further at the demand. He is a traitor to my throne! The Emperor bit back his words through clenched teeth, a caged outburst atypical of the Emperor's usual measured demeanor. Veronique placed a book upon his desk, sliding it under the Emperor's gaze. She added in clipped cadence, never breaking eye contact, "I think I must insist on this matter." The color that had risen drained from Brinton Auroras' face as he glanced down and recognized the book before him. Veronique turned and left without waiting on an answer, but added as she exited, "I expect that returned to me after the Uldani's rendering." Staring up at the Emperor, like a scorpion poised to strike, was the book Lady Courvermain had left. 200 Years of Blood. A History of the Zalian-Uldani War. Back in the sterile marble chamber of the Hall of Judgment where Osmond awaited his fate, no words were spoken, as was the custom. Veronique looked on as the bell of fate rang 7 times. On each tolling, one speaker raised a white-gloved hand which then turned black. The vote of exile. Lady Courvermain did not linger. She had heard Blossom Festival in Jadenpool was quite a sight to behold, and her dear friend Christophe Calaison had 5 ships in port for the celebration.